Thank you for participating in the Humane Summit, a virtual speaker series brought to you by the Humane Education Coalition. This session is sponsored by the Griffin Press and the Humane Society of the United States. We are grateful for your attendance today for Kristina Hulvershorn's speaker session, How to Create Interactive Humane Education Experiences. Kristina is the Director of Restorative and Humane Programs at Peace Learning Center and is the Indianapolis Program Manager for HEART. She created Be the Change, which is an interactive humane education museum inside Peace Learning Center, and she is the author of the children's book, Secret of the Troublemakers. At this time, I will pass things over to our speaker, Kristina Hulvershorn.
Welcome to this session on how to create interactive humane education experiences. I'm Kristina Hulvershorn, and I'd like to start with a quick introduction to help tell the story of Be the Change. So I was a Montessori kid, and like a lot of kids, I learned by doing, touching, moving, thinking, and going at my own pace. So as I became a teacher and then a humane educator, I found myself trying to create similar opportunities for the kids that I taught. When I moved back to my hometown in Indianapolis from Chicago, I began work at the Peace Learning Center, and I jokingly told my coworkers that I brought a lot of humane education baggage. But I meant it both literally and figuratively. I've amassed a number of things that I thought of as visual aids and manipulatives, but I also carry my humane education with me in all of my work. As a humane educator, this is the most important work that I've ever done, and I knew that in any role I would find ways of infusing it. So luckily, I was able to do just that when we created Be the Change. So we found unused space in the basement of Peace Learning Center, and I wrote a couple of small grants, and the rest is history. So the easiest way to talk through this is going to be to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to try to lead you on a bit of a virtual tour. So this is Peace Learning Center. It's just as beautiful as it looks. It's on a reservoir in a city park inside Eagle Creek Park, and we're lucky enough to call that home. So when you walk in that front door there, you come to a sign that directs you to start thinking about things a little bit differently. We ask people to start thinking about, what does that mean? Compassion is a verb. So in you come, and Peace Learning Center is a small museum, and it's a joint project between Peace Learning Center and HEART, and it contains 30 different exhibits that are designed to immerse the visitor in humane education topics, from water and the carbon footprint of the foods we eat, to the global impact of consumerism, to child labor. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. So my goal is to show you that you too can make hands-on exhibits that are going to help amplify and deepen your own humane education efforts. So today I want to show you around a bit, give you a closer look at a few exhibits, and then give you some guidelines that I think will be helpful if you're interested in making any of your own exhibits. So everything in the museum is designed to be interactive. We know that kids learn by playing and by doing, so we came up with a number of ways to keep participants' hands busy, minds engaged, with the goal of keeping their hearts open to learning new ways of living compassionately. Some of our exhibits were actually made by the youth that we work with. So this satellite dish that's on the floor here was actually made, it was brought in by a student of ours, and she said, "Can you believe my grandma was going to get rid of this?" So we thought about what we could do with it, and realized we had a problem on our hands of some of our younger campers not understanding the way that greenhouse gases trap the sun's energy. And so we ended up making this as a model that we use every single year at climate camp and in the museum to teach kids some of the science behind climate change. So speaking of greenhouse gases, often to convey the carbon footprint of our activities, we've all heard that. We hear statistics like the average American generates about 20,000 pounds of CO2 a year, things like that. And I, for one, when I hear something like that, I think, what is a pound of CO2? So the things that make me curious or motivated to change a behavior are also the inspiration behind a lot of our exhibits. It was me trying to sort things out and understand them in a way that I could teach them to others. So These paper mache balloons are a visual representation of 1 pound of CO2. What we did was we consulted with some local climate scientists and determined that the space that would be occupied by 1 pound of CO2, or carbon dioxide, was about equivalent to 27 full balloons. So this is Jonathan, one of our climate campers, and he actually helped make these paper mache balloons. So he really enjoyed talking people through it to understand what they were all about. We also worked hard to make sure that we had something for every age. Even though it was designed for about grade school age kids, we've also been really humbled by how meaningful it's been to some of our adult visitors. I think most humane educators know what I'm talking about when you teach a group of kids a topic and the teacher in the room or the other adult in the room didn't know about it either. So we see a lot of that around Peace Learning Center and Be the Change too. We know that children are born curious and are full of compassion and wonder, so giving them opportunities to tap into that compassion is critical. So here are some of our puppets from Empathy Theater taking a break to delight a young visitor. All right, so let's actually get into some of these exhibits. So this exhibit on the left is a repurposed dollhouse called the Eco Home. And the task of the participant as you go through this exhibit is to try to find evidence of 30 different actions that this family is taking to live sustainably. So from planting a garden to writing letters to legislators, donating clothing, this family keeps pretty busy trying to do right by Mother Nature. To make it extra fun, we ask local restaurants to donate used corks. So we have a big supply of corks and we allow all visitors to make an additional cork person. And we say you can either leave your person to move into this house or you can take it with you to help motivate you to live like the family in this home. So this corner is really about allowing students to see the other side of the products that we consume. So the store is full of enticing items, but attached to those items are price tags, just like they are in a regular store, but they're oversized price tags. And when you turn them around, the intent is to show the true cost of the product on animals, on ecosystems, and on other humans. So from chocolate and soccer balls, this exhibit really pulls visitors in because kids think that they're going to get to consume an item. And then they're often really surprised to see that there's definitely more than meets the eye to a lot of the consumer products that we see every day. And right next to it is Material World, and that demonstrates how much of the world's resources the USA uses and asks participants to consider how this consumption relates to being happy and satisfied. And this is one of our longtime campers, Ocean. She'd be really mad at me if she knew I was sharing this picture, but this was the first time she read about the true cost of a cell phone. And she just had that reaction, and I see that all the time. Kids are a little bit appalled, as a lot of us are when we find out the true cost of some of the items that we consume. Now here we have on the right, a whale stomach. Now this is an activity modified from Zoowile, and it allows participants to stand under the contents of the net and guess what those items have in common. So then they're shown a list from a newspaper article that lists all the items that were found inside this particular whale's stomach. So bits of rope, plastic, a rubber glove, and even a pair of sweatpants and a golf ball. So children are fascinated and are deeply affected by the reality of this. We immediately connect them with the causes for this and then ways that we can meaningfully address and prevent issues like this. So every exhibit connects a participant with a way that they can be the change in big or small ways, whether it's their consumption, whether it's speaking out, any way that they can react is important for them to know. So we don't shy away from telling visitors, even young visitors, the truth about these issues, but we always work to show them that there's something that they can do to help the situation. Here you see the deforestation simulation, and this is a simulation that allows participants to literally get their hands dirty and to see how complex a forest ecosystem really is. So what happens to CO2 when we cut trees? What happens when native species when grazing occurs? What happens when we leave the trees alone? And then what about when all of these things are happening simultaneously? So there's little models that represent pollution, that represent trees and plants, and that represent all kinds of different animals. And so you're really immersing yourself in deforestation and what happens when these things occur. So as promised, we took a long look at what made our exhibit successful. And so we asked ourselves, what really helps make certain things interesting and helpful for kids and visitors? And we realized that a lot of it wasn't really very complicated or difficult, but that our most successful exhibits did have a few things in common. And these are some of those things that we realized they had in common. So what I'm going to do is explain what we learned through these guidelines. And we're going to start with, what is that? So one of the most important elements is the first impression, because this is a place where you could walk right by an exhibit or you could get drawn into it and really learn something from it. So what is going to catch the eye and quite literally make visitors stop and say, what is that? Or is that real? Or can we touch that? Those are usually the first three things I hear about a lot of the exhibits. So the fake food, for example, is incredibly interesting to kids. If you've ever had fake food around children, I think it might be nearly impossible to actually get them to not touch it. So they have to play with it, they have to make a joke about it. But once they've kind of taken it in, there's plenty of signage all around for them to start understanding, okay, why is this fake food in here? And they're asked then to make themselves a plate of that food, and then they're calculating the carbon footprint of that meal, as well as the amount of water required for each of the different foods. So it's a way to get somebody pulled in and stay in for the content. So then Grace here on the left, now she's not a real hen, as you can tell, but the battery cage is. So she, and among another few exhibits, is given a name and a story to allow participants to connect with the reality of their lives. So the cage was donated to us from someone who salvaged it after an egg-laying facility closed. And kids learned that cages like this would actually be stacked one up on top of another, and that Gracie would have to share this cage with quite a few other hens. So you can see the pattern here. Something interesting or even strange draws you in, and then there's a simple and clear explanation written to help answer the questions that you inevitably have. That's usually somewhere on the black frames, as you can see. Also to note, we do depend on English language literacy, and we plan accordingly. So if I have non-readers in a group coming through, I strategically put them with peers who are able to read, and they always sort it out. If I have a large group of non-readers, I just do more full group guidance, and then we process the information together. It's something to think about, and paying attention to literacy and how much your exhibits depend on it is important. So walking the walk, isn't that the challenge with humane education? We worked really hard to make sure that the actual supplies and goods that we used were really aligned with the sustainability and compassion that the museum is all about. So the floors, for example, were painted in a zero VOC friendly paint. Many of the materials were from a store that went out of business, or things that we were, found around our own homes or organizations. And then many of the materials were found objects. The walls are clad in pallet wood salvaged from the trash. Our containers for this, as you can see, are old paint cans. And it took a lot of work. It takes longer to use repurposed things. It might take a little bit longer to source these sorts of things. But kids get it. Kids understand the connections that we're making with these actual objects. So being intentional about purchasing, and most often not purchasing, it drove my coworkers crazy, because they said this would be so much easier if we could just go to a store and buy this. But but this is what this is about. A little creativity and thinking outside of the box really allowed us to do a lot without consuming very much at all. So I would consider a lot of these exhibits functional art, and the aesthetics of the exhibits, they were really important to us. So in many cases, less is more. So keeping exhibits inviting, bold, and simple helps direct your eye to what the content is trying to focus on, rather than clutter. So we worked hard to keep colors and fonts consistent and complementary. We also work to incorporate interesting visual elements to convey information and that will continue to draw people in. So for example, these pie charts, they're made out of repurposed boxes first, and then on top of the boxes were magazine images that represented the content of what they were talking about. And then the sign, you know, it was made of all kinds of old toys and pencils. This is about consumerism. So it was just examples of the sorts of things that we tend to consume a lot. And you can see there's little worry dolls to help kids understand the mathematics of the proportion of that the US is only 5% of the world's population, but creates so much more in terms of pollution, waste, and then also in terms of consumption. So while we're talking about art, I wanted to share another example. Now, the real art is Mother Nature, as you can see, the water out of that window. But what I want to talk about is on the left side here. So it looks like 4 depictions of the planet Earth. And this, I think, is a little bit of a lovely story. So as we were doing this, a local Unitarian church found out about what we were doing, and they said, we want to help. How can we help? And so we got together and I asked them to bring some things from home that they didn't need anymore, and especially to ask kids to donate things that they were done with. So broken toys, electronics, things that you couldn't do anything else with. And so we knew that the exhibit, this exhibit was going to be about the statistic that if everyone on the planet lived like an American, we would need 4 Earths, but we only have 1 Earth. And so they worked together to create this out of their own waste. And it was a really beautiful thing to see the community coming and wanting to help, and so many kids getting involved, and then creating something that I think is a really beautiful portrayal of a really serious problem. So it's very possible to leverage lots of community support and still make beautiful art. So we have to make room for reflection. Many of the exhibits require a bit of work on the part of the participant to understand what they're all about. So whether it's solving this riddle of how many dogs can come from an unspayed female's family tree, or the carbon footprint of a meal, creating time and space for understanding is really, really important to encourage participants to really think about that content. In this regard, the exhibits are intentionally non-didactic, so they allow room for participants to grapple with the facts. And we're very careful to try our very best to keep those accurate, and then to come up with their own conclusions. This is really important. If, for example, we add any element of shame or judgment, we're just going to lose people. They're not going to be interested, and they're much less likely to engage with this material in a positive and open way. Many of us just shut down when we feel shame, and so leaving room for understanding and then applying that new knowledge is really important. So I actually believe that this is why thousands of visitors later, many of our visitors say many of these are visitors who didn't come here for the purpose of Be the Change. They were already in the museum, already in the park or something like that. So some of these are people who did not know what they were getting. But thousands of visitors later, we've not received any complaints or concerns about this content. More often, we hear people say that they want to come back or bring more people the next time they come. So creating room for people to draw their own conclusions is really important. And last but not least, it's important to ask the right questions. We worked really hard to come up with meaningful questions to inspire deep and critical thinking throughout the exhibit. So in empathy theater, for example, we asked students to become one of the animals and then ask them questions like, and I want you to do this with me if you can. So you can choose an animal. I'm going to ask questions of the owl, but you can choose any animal you want to just take a moment and really try to look at the world from their perspective. So what do you like about being an owl? What's hard about being an owl? What do you want others to know about being an owl? What could others do to make your life better? So practicing this deep and intentional empathy can be both challenging and rewarding for kids. And it's one of the clearest paths that I know of to creating a sustainable and peaceful world. And I know this sounds simple, but taking a moment to truly look at the world from another's perspective can change everything. So hopefully you can see that it actually is possible to balance fun, playfulness, creativity, critical thought, serious issues, and inspiration. One of my favorite phenomenon that happens is when a visit to Be the Change inspires a whole project or a unit of study. And we hear that a lot. Kids get really interested in something that they learned and they want to learn more about it. Or the realization on the part of the adult, whether that's a teacher or a parent, who finally sees that their kids are much more capable of understanding and taking action than they previously thought. So it's one of my favorite things that happens. So sometimes I take these exhibits on the road and bring them to other places. So this is a photo of me on a school visit, and as you can see, the kids are always fascinated, that fake food, they can't get enough of it. But hopefully, whether in a small or a big way, you're ready to use your creativity and shine the light on these critically important topics. The final exhibit at Be the Change asks participants this question: who is the change maker the world is waiting for? And when you draw the curtain back, a mirror reveals the answer. And I wish I could show that mirror to all of you, because we too are who we've been waiting for. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me and being part of the summit. I can't wait to connect with some of you. I love sharing and I love giving any of the stuff that I have for the museum. If I have directions or anything at all that I can send you, I'm more than happy to share. So these are some ways that you can connect with me. I'm able to be reached, and I would love to make contact with some of you from all over the world. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you around the summit.
This concludes our speaker session. Thank you so much for joining us. You can learn more here or by clicking the resource links in the summit. We hope you've enjoyed this speaker session and that you'll join us for another one soon. Please consider making a donation to the Humane Education Coalition to help us continue providing programs and events like the Humane Summit. We rely on your support to help create a more compassionate, just, and sustainable future through education. Visit hecoalition.org/give to contribute today. Thanks again.